Great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning and welcome to Nevada Hotel and Lodging Association's webinar titled Leading the Industry in Today's Environment. My name is Anthony Lai and I am with the International School of Hospitality along with being an active member of NHLA, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Today, we're going to hear three of the top leaders from MGM Resorts International and talk about the challenges faced in today's ever-evolving environment. The panel will answer questions from our NHLA members and provide insights and best practices that work as leaders adjust their strategies and actions while managing effectively in this new post-pandemic business climate. I'd like to kick off the session with the introduction to Andy Meese, who is the creator of the MGM webinar series. Andy is the Vice President of Hospitality for the Mandalay Bay, Delano, and Luxor properties, as he will kick off with the introductions of the panel. Hi, Andy.
Good morning, Anthony, and good morning, everybody. And welcome again to, I believe, is our sixth session of various topics that we've been able to get some unbelievable leaders within MGM Resorts. Again, my name is Andy Meese. I am Vice President of Hospitality for Mandalay Bay, Delano, and the Luxor. I have been with MGM Resorts for over 21 years, a lot of different properties, and also have been an active member with the Nevada Hotel and Lodging Association for many years, and about a year and a half have served on the board and executive committee. And these series have been, I think, hopefully very valuable. I think right now the time that we're in is probably a bit crazy for everybody. Talk about this topic, which I think is very timely, leading in today's environment. And what does today's environment mean? And I think it's ever changing right now, very fluid. We're all ramping at paces that arguably are even difficult to maintain, but nonetheless exciting and evident just the strength of our company and, more importantly, our community in Las Vegas. So I've got the privilege to obviously be able to just briefly introduce, and I'll have them introduce themselves as well, three senior leaders within our company that I have actually known and considered colleagues and friends for a very long time. And you're going to hear from them today. You can see the screen, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to them to introduce themselves, and then we'll start with the panel discussion. So I'll start with Mark Czerniak. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it. Maybe just a little bit about me. First, maybe thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to talk to all of you today. A little bit about me. So I've only been with MGM Resorts for about 5 years. I started my hospitality career with Ritz-Carlton. I got a degree in finance, hence the finance focus, but kind of stumbled into hospitality a little more indirectly. I graduated college and lo and behold, couldn't find a job. So, I mean, I think I did pretty well in college, obviously not well enough, but I was lucky enough. A friend of mine was valet parking cars at the Ritz-Carlton in New Orleans. And if you've been to New Orleans, you can imagine a 21-year-old would want to stay there for a little bit longer after graduating from school. So I joined my friend valet parking cars there, kind of thinking it'd be a 6-month, maybe 3-month thing, and eventually I'd find a real job, as I kind of thought of it then. Who would have thought that would lead to an entire career? So from that, I was able to kind of get into the finance world within Ritz-Carlton. So able to move around a lot, worked in New Orleans, Philadelphia, the Cayman Islands, eventually ended up at a Marriott in Brooklyn. So had a pretty wide experience with that company, great employee-centric, guest-centric upbringing for me in the industry, and lucky enough to have interacted with a boss at a property in Philly who ended up working with MGM Resorts. So opened up an opportunity for me to join the team at Monte Carlo. And if you're familiar with that property, obviously Monte Carlo went through a major transition. So I was there through the I guess the breakdown and the rebuild into Park MGM. So a unique kind of introduction to Las Vegas. And all the different pieces that go into these crazy resorts on the Strip. So really able to learn a lot in about 3 years there. From there, became the CFO at New York, Did that the year right up leading to the pandemic, and as soon as we closed about a month later, my role expanded to also include MGM Grand. So been in my current role a little over a year now, through reopening back in June 4th for both New York, and MGM Grand through this wild ride of a year, and really looking forward to what's happening now, but also what's in store for our business in the future. I think we're very well positioned to take advantage of what looks to be a very promising next couple of years. So appreciate being here, and thanks for the chance to introduce myself.
I'll jump in next. Thanks, Mark. And again, thanks, Andy, and thanks, Anthony, and thanks to everyone who's here today joining us. Kevin Holyfield, I'm Vice President of Hotel Strategy for MGM Resorts. I've been with the company now for 13 years. This is my 25th year in the industry. I'm actually from Fairbanks, Alaska, so I actually started my career in hospitality working with Princess Cruises, a little bit different area of hospitality versus hotels. But I joined Princess Cruises, was with Princess for 5.5 years, primarily land-based, working out of Alaska. During the off season, did logistics planning and coordination for everything that happened during the summertime. And then I decided that I loved hospitality, but didn't want to be in the cruise industry forever. So packed my bags, moved to Vegas, was going to school at UNLV, and had the opportunity of joining Four Seasons, a company that I had never heard of at the time. And of course, being from Alaska. And so started working Four Seasons Las Vegas. So I actually started off at the front desk. I had the opportunity of working in a number of different areas, and ultimately leading rooms division helping lead rooms division at Four Seasons Las Vegas. And then in late 2002, I had the opportunity of going and doing a hotel opening. And I was young and said, why not? So I should have asked where it was before I said yes. I found out that it was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Not exactly where I was thinking of. So I packed my bags and I spent 4 months over in Saudi Arabia, opening the Four Seasons Kingdom Palace in Riyadh, which was an amazing experience. From there, that led me to really just doing openings, budget reviews, labor analysis, operational reviews with Four Seasons Corporate for the next 5 years. So in total, I was with Four Seasons for about 6.5 years. I opened 35 hotels around the world with Four Seasons. I was traveling 350 days a year. So literally lived and breathed hotels for a good portion of my career. And then in 2008, MGM Resorts was creating a subsidiary company called MGM Hospitality, focused on building non-gaming hotel developments globally. And so I was able to join them as director of hotel ops, really focused on creating MGM Grand and Bellagio brands around the world. Of course, 2008 wasn't a great time to start a company. So, it was slow going for a little bit, but we made some good progress. And then in 2016, I joined and actually helped create what is now Hotel Strategy, our corporate hotel operations division. In 2017, I went and joined Mark at Park MGM, leading hotel operations for actually Monte Carlo at the time, leading hotel operations for Monte Carlo in the cultural transition to what is now Park MGM and Nomad. In 2019, went to Mandalay Bay. In 2020, was actually previously in Andy's role as Vice President of Hospitality. And then just earlier this year, had the opportunity of coming back to corporate, leading hotel strategy for the company. So again, thank you. I'll hand it over to Heather.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and then giving us the opportunity to talk a little bit about our industry. I really appreciate everyone taking the time, and thank you, Andy and Anthony, for organizing this. So my story is not as exciting as Kevin's or Mark, but nonetheless, it's still a good story. I started at MGM when I was in college, and now in December, I will be 20 years with the company. So within MGM, I've done a number of different roles. I spent the first 10 years in operations. I started at the front desk, hotel management, room reservations, concierge, and then I ended up in room revenue. At about that time, I decided that I wanted to do something a little more exciting. And I was offered a job with a technology startup company. So I put in my resignation with MGM and I was ready to embark on this wild startup tour. And at the time, the SVP of revenue, who I was working with, came to me and said, listen, if you want to be in technology and you want to be in a startup, we sort of have that here at MGM. Why don't you try it here? So I made the decision to do that. And although it was a very big company, we were a very small technology organization. And the organization that I joined was all around custom development, so custom development software. And at the time, there was about 10 of us in total. And if you're familiar with the technology or engineering practice, 10 people is not a lot. We had a very small team and we were building a website at that time. And we would, you'd have a developer that did the coding, he would code, deploy it out to all of our customers. I would take a look, do some testing, and that's how we operated. So 10 years later, I'm still within technology. Right now, I am the Vice President of Technical Program Management. And our team has now grown from that small little 10 people to in the upwards of 500. So it's been a very exciting journey. Learned a lot. Right now I have a team of program managers within engineering that report to me, and we do a number of different programs, everything from data to platform to digital. So that's a little bit about me. And again, thank you for having me.
All right, well, thank you, Mark, Kevin, and Heather for sharing your background. All very interesting, all from different aspects of various hospitality departments. And I know we're going to delve a little bit more into it as we get onto the Q&A sessions. We'll now start off with answering the pre-selected questions from our NHLA members. If anyone in our live audience that does have a question for our panelists, please type it in the chat feature or type it in the Q&A box. We'll get it answered either during the session, or we'll also have the last 10 minutes to answer any outstanding questions that we have for our panelists. So panelists, ready to begin? Yes? Okay, wonderful. So the very first question, I'm going to have this question directed to Kevin. Kevin, as the VP of Hotel Strategy for MGM, what have you found to be the most challenging management aspect of our current environment and dealing with all the changes? And can you give us some insight on the best ways to deal with that?
Sure, thanks, Anthony. Great question, especially in today's environment. I think, and Andy actually spoke about this in his opening and introduction a little bit. I think there's a few components to what's been challenging in this current environment. Number one is the number of changes that have taken place. I mean, everything from closing down Las Vegas effectively in March of last year to figuring out what that looked like, how to do it, and then keeping, to some degree, at least a few lights on in our buildings, then ultimately reopening with limited staffing, limited demand, and as Mark said earlier, ramping to where we are today. And so there's the number of changes, there's the frequency in which those changes have occurred. Oftentimes it's, go left and then go right, and then go back left again. And so it's the frequency of those changes. And then I think from the complexity standpoint, it's how do you communicate those changes so that everyone's aware? Anytime there is a significant change, we want to figure out how to make sure to keep our team members, to keep our guests and to keep our vendors, suppliers, and partners informed so we can work together. And then I think lastly is limited staffing. I'm sure everyone knows that there's positions open, not only within MGM Resorts, but within most companies. And so it's trying to hire, but then at the same time, it's doing more with less. And so I think those are really the four key challenges that we've faced in this current environment. And then kind of the second part of the question is, how do we deal with it? So one is for those who know me, I love my quotes. One of my favorite is change is the only constant. And that's important because this environment has been riddled with change. And so now, while change is often good and change exists for good reasons in most cases, there's also the perspective of change fatigue. And so that's an important concept that I think we have to realize and understand, because if change is the only constant and it's happening so fast, sometimes people get tired of change because change isn't always easy. And so with that, it's understanding the environment, understanding what could happen, what may happen, what will happen, what won't happen. And therefore, it kind of relates to anticipating as much change as possible, how we're thinking about change, how we're approaching change, how we're embracing change. And then that leads to what I think a great concept called agile leadership. And so with agile leadership, it's as a leader, being able to understand the dynamics around you, understand who your tribe is. So those people that you can, that support and you can call upon to help with change, whether it's another perspective, whether it's executing change, whether it's communicating change, or otherwise, the people that are within your circle, if you will. And so I think with that, those are some key aspects of how we manage through change. And then as it relates to the limited staffing, it's ultimately we have to determine what can be done and what can't be done. We have to prioritize our work, prioritize our projects. And so the way I think about it is really in four buckets: people, product, profit, and projects. And we have to prioritize out of each of those what we can do and what we can't do. And so again, change isn't easy. There's a lot of it. There is change fatigue. And so, most importantly, it's agile leadership, understanding how we anticipate change, how we act to change, how we react to change, and then ultimately how we lead our teams through change and then communicate it out.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I have to agree. Lots of change. And I think you hit right on point on change is a constant, but we always fail to recognize that change can also be heavy on like the fatigue, whether it comes from our employees, our guests, especially during this pandemic, every day is changing. There's a question on our Q&A feature coming from Dawn, and I believe this question is actually directed to you, Kevin. With the enhanced emphasis on health for guests due to the pandemic, what is MGM doing to provide service that assists them should they become sick at one of your properties?
Sure, great question, and thanks, Don. So there's actually a lot that MGM Resorts is doing. One is we've partnered with Community Ambulance here in Las Vegas, who's our partner and medical professional partner. So if there is a guest that feels ill, doesn't feel right, we actually have the opportunity of bringing Community Ambulance into our properties, into the guest rooms to support that guest. We also have on-site COVID testing for guests, so they can actually go to the guest room, provide a rapid test to the guest. We have a couple different tiers of testing available for guests, whether it's just traveling back to a location in which that location requires a negative COVID test, or if it's, again, in the case of a guest that doesn't feel well. And then even for our employees, that's been a big focus. Every employee has access to COVID testing. We have very specific health and safety protocols. We do have on our website our 7-point health and safety plan, which is at a high level the things we're doing as a company, the safety measures that we have in place, whether it be personal protective equipment, whether it be vaccination availability, testing availability, and much, much more. So, Don, to the question, it's been change all around what we do and how we do it. We work closely with health and safety officials, both from the state of Nevada as well as that of the CDC, to ensure that we're doing everything we can as a company to make sure that our guests and employees feel safe. Hopefully that answers your question, but no, great question.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Now while we're still on the topic on dealing with changes when it comes to leadership, these changes cost money. And this question is for Mark. As the CFO, when it comes to budgeting and planning for today's climate, what considerations do you recommend for hotel leaders?
Well, maybe first I'll just say don't hold yourself too accountable to being accurate right now. I can't tell you the number of times we've kind of in the last 6 months thought we knew what was coming in the next 90 days. And I think we all can probably agree that has not necessarily come to fruition. So I mean, I think the first thing is like, don't spend a ton of time trying to be accurate or specific. I think what's more important is to be prepared for a bunch of different possibilities. And I think from my lens, that's kind of where my focus is at, is there could be a lot of different paths here in the future, especially this upcoming remainder of the year and really into 2022. So you have to think about how to get your operation prepared to handle those different possibilities. I think first, I would personally think we want to prepare for the upside. I mean, if anything, this last 3 months have taught me is the consumer's ready to come back and they're ready to travel. And we need to continue to do a great job to take care from a health and safety perspective for our employees and our guests so we can take advantage of that. But there's demand. And so we have to be prepared for that. And I think things that we've learned recently is, the supply chain is difficult right now. If you're getting anything from Asia or a different country, it's hard to get materials in. So how do you plan for the future to be ready for that? Staffing, as Kevin mentioned, is crazy right now. It's an employee market, and it's difficult to be able to staff up so quickly. I mean, think of it in some ways like if you've ever been part of a property opening, it's really hard to hire people when like things are normal. Now it's like there's some properties opening, especially in Vegas, but also like we're all growing and expanding very quickly, and you can't expect people that worked for you a year ago to have gone a whole year without finding other jobs. So getting ahead of the hiring cycle, I think, is critical. And I think what I would maybe say is it's okay to be potentially slightly less profitable in the short term to be prepared for the wave that's coming in the more long term. And so as I talk to our different department leaders around the properties at MGM Grand and New York and Signature, it's how do we be prepared for this next wave? I mean, convention business is coming back to Vegas. We're pretty confident. We have good business on the books. And so you probably all can tell the weekends are super strong. Weekdays are better, but still not back to where they were pre-pandemic, but that's going to change soon. So, I think in the industry, we all sort of missed that wave back in March a little bit, got a little bit behind. I think what we have to do now is not miss this next wave. And so to be prepared and think about that inevitable. Maybe separately, like you also want to think about what the downside looks like. Fortunately, I guess we all had the opportunity to kind of practice what that looked like over the last year. So we've become more dynamic. I think we challenge expense and we challenge variability on how we staff and what we open and where the profitable aspects of our business are. So I think we've flexed that muscle a lot. So I feel fairly confident that, especially in the hospitality industry and the hotel industry specifically, like I think you guys have all had the opportunity to learn what it means to manage through a varying business. For me, the odd part about coming to Vegas, I've worked in other markets where there was a lot more significant seasonality. Here, you cry when hotel occupancy is in the 80% pre-pandemic. It's been, I think, a challenge to learn how to kind of operate with wild swings. So I feel confident we're prepared for the downside, but I would really suggest you got to be ready for the next wave. It's okay to miss it that first time, but I think at this point we all know what's coming, and we want to be ready to take advantage of that to make sure our customers have a fabulous time, because I think they're going to come one way or another. So we got to set them up to have a great experience, and maybe most importantly, make sure our employees have a better experience through this next growth wave. We put them through an awful lot this last year. So I think it behooves us as leaders to prepare our properties to make sure this next kind of growth is a little easier on them so they can take care of our customers.
Yes, absolutely. And lots of lessons learned. And I know that this webinar was initially planned in April, and now that we're in June, who knew that we have have this unforeseen demand that just is coming down to Vegas, and we have to focus more on our supply chain, whether that be products or even as talent, providing, making sure that we have enough people, our support staff, to facilitate that big demand.
Anthony, I can tell you it is a lot more fun to be a CFO now than it was 6 months ago. I much prefer to tell people yes than no. So having to say no all the time can get difficult. So
yes, good things are coming, absolutely. Now we're going to switch gears a little bit. Now this question is directed to Heather. So Heather, how does your role as VP of Technical Management interact with the departments of MGM? And what is the goal?
Yeah, so that's a very a loaded question. But, just to piggyback a little bit on what, Kevin and Mark said too, is, technology is playing just a huge role in our environment right now. When you look at, the employee market, it's hard to get people back into the properties. It's important for technology to start looking at how to make things a bit more efficient. How do employees do their job quicker and easier? And so that, that is one thing that we are looking at. But there's been a lot of different things, that we've been doing within technology, really to support this new environment that we're in. Now, how we work with other teams, just to give you an idea, and I'm going to get a little technical here, but I want to explain the way we operate. So within program management and technology, we really work with every team across the organization. I just mentioned taking a look at all of the employee tools that all of our employees are using, and how do we streamline that? How do we make it more efficient? Right when the pandemic started, we were rolling out, mobile check-in, making sure that our guest could use a key on their phone to get into their rooms. So in that position, working with hotel operations, we're working with finance all the time. The technology department in most organizations is not just naturally or organically funded. So every year at the beginning of the fiscal year, we do have to ask for, the budget and the money. So those are just a few departments to name. But the way that our model works, we work in product teams. And what that means is for each product or initiative that we want to go after, we create this circle of a team that includes several different roles. So if you think about employee tools, we create a product team that will take someone from our operations business. So we could work with someone from Kevin's team, potentially, and say, can you be part of our product team and really be our person that's knowledgeable from the operations side to help guide us? And then we also include the team. So you'll have engineers that are actually doing coding, a program manager, and then a product manager. Now the product manager will work also with the business stakeholders to drill down a little bit deeper. So if you're thinking about employee tools, Kevin could say, I don't know why I have to click 5 times in this application. So then we bring in a product manager that drills a little bit deeper. They'll do analysis to see what other tools are out there that maybe you don't have to click 5 times. And then they'll build out what we call a requirement. So they'll say, okay, the customer does not want to click 5 times. We're going to try to build this. And so within the product team, that's kind of how we're managed. And within each product team, you're going to have a little bit of a different stakeholder across the organization, depending on what we're focusing on. Right now in technology, we just launched 23 different product teams. So you think that it's 23 different stakeholder groups across the organization that we're working with. And we're doing everything, like I mentioned, employee tools to website optimization, mobile check-in, how to search better on the website. So there's a wide array, but in technology, you're not successful, really, if you're not working with every single department to understand like what technology will do for them and how to make our customers and our guests and our peers' life better.
Yes, absolutely fascinating. I never knew that technology plays such an important role, and how you have 23 stakeholders that are involved in this corporation. Absolutely fascinating. Now we're going to ask the question to Kevin, just on was kind of related to the first question that I asked to you. If you can describe some of the best practices in place that can help leaders in any type of hotel operation.
Sure. Thanks, Anthony. I think one thing that the last year and a half has taught us is we have to think about our business a little bit differently. We have to make sure that we're focusing on truly what matters. And so one of the big focuses, and we talk about staffing, we talk about hiring, is culture. And everyone's familiar with the service profit chain. And now I think it's the opportunity of getting back to basics when it comes to culture. All of us are in the hospitality industry, and we have to remember the sole purpose of hospitality industry is to be hospitable. It's about creating memories, creating experiences, and we have to focus on that. That's why we're here. That's what we do. Over the last 5-10 years, I think some companies have gone away from the culture, the experience, and why we're all here. And so I think, again, it's getting back to basics on that. When I was with Four Seasons, they had a great, I guess, guide, which is the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated. I like thinking of it now as the platinum rule: treat others as they want to be treated. But when you think about that, when you think about treating others as you want to be treated, I think it does a few things. One is there's an emotional connection that is formed. It helps create understanding, and it helps build perspective. And so when you put yourself in other people's shoes, it's important as we, as leaders, employees, managers, whomever, treat others as you want to be treated. Doing things like saying thank you, creating appreciation, just having those connections, which then goes to my next point of understanding servant leadership. Servant leadership really focuses on listening, empathy, healing, self-awareness, and more. And this is the environment of servant leadership. We all have to roll up our sleeves. We have to get our hands dirty. And there's an expectation that we have to do that. We can't sit back in our offices and direct. We have to be with our teams leading change. And then the third point is something I actually had a recent focus on, which we came up with a fancy title for it. And the title is Communications Architecture. over the course of the last 18 months, I think all of us have experienced, as we're here today as well, through virtual mediums of communication, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Teams, whether it's other media platforms that allow us the opportunity of connecting. That's been great because I think in some cases we've been a lot more efficient, but in other cases, it's meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. And so when you think about the concept of communications architecture, it's making sure that we're efficient and effective with what we do and how we do it. From the communication standpoint, making sure that we're communicating to the right audience with the right information, the right way, and at the right time. And so we've spent a lot of time focusing on how do we reduce meetings? How do we make sure that we're spending time, as I said previously, servant leadership, spending time with employees, spending time on the floor, spending time walking our property, spending time with our leaders to ensure that we're there with them rolling up our sleeves. There's a great Harvard Business Review article called How to Run a Meeting. And as basic as it sounds, it's actually a really great reference. I think it was from the late 70s, but it's a really great perspective on how to be efficient when it comes to meetings. And again, in today's environment where we're trying to do more with less, being as efficient as we possibly can is crucially important. And then I think the last thing, as I said before, is agile leadership. We have to be able to adapt to change. We have to be able to understand what mechanics of change could exist, may exist, will exist, and won't exist. And then we have to be able to communicate that change and support our teams through change. And so from my perspective, those are the four main components that you as leaders, regardless of your position, regardless of your role, can do to think about how we focus into the future in terms of hotel operations or any other operations. It could be food and beverage operations. It could be even outside of the hotel industry. But those are four components, from my perspective, that are important in today's environment.
Sorry about that. I'm trying to go mute and then I want to unmute and then unmute to mute. Yes, absolutely, Kevin. I think, it's a great time as leaders to really have that self-reflection amongst themselves and ask themselves, am I really in the hospitality business and I'm being hospitable to our staff and our guests? And when it comes to, having so many meetings, our employees, are they engaged in those meetings? If not, then the meetings are pointless in this case. Now we're gonna, next question is for Mark. So Mark, with increased expenses and reduced revenues, what can you recommend for future income strategies for properties?
Yeah, I think Kevin touched a lot on change earlier, which I think is important to think about change management. We've all been kind of forced to go through a lot of different change over the last year. So that's obviously something to continue to think about. And, Heather talked a lot about technology, which is pretty critical for the future. Maybe one thing I'd recommend for everybody, and I think Kevin and Heather probably maybe were both there as well. And we had a recent training seminar with some pieces from our digital group at MGM. And, in my career, I've always heard, like, if you go to an orientation or something at a new property, you hear from the salesperson, everyone's a sales leader, right? Or, everyone's responsible for customer service. You kind of hear those things. Maybe the message I heard recently was we all are all digital leaders too. And we all need to take some time to focus on our own digital fluency. The world's changing fast. Our customers are probably changing faster than we all are, unfortunately, which is probably normal. So how do we understand technology that's important to them and the digital side of the world that's important to our customers to improve our customer experience? And then maybe in addition to that, understand the digital fluency from our employee bases and how do we focus on that? I mean, Kevin talked about communication. So if you're thinking about income strategies for the future, the best thing you can do is communicate with your team and understand what the customer's feeling in your business. I mean, that's the end of it all in hospitality. In the end, is all we're trying to do is create unique, memorable experiences for our customers in our buildings, right? So if you think about future income strategies, you're going to figure that out from your customers, and a lot of that's going to come from your employees. So, I would focus on truly understanding what are the digital changes coming in the world, because maybe we're not all comfortable with some of those things. It depends on, what your personal experiences are. So gaining you don't need to become an expert. Like, I'm never going to learn how to go write code or design apps. I wish I could. I probably would have a lot more money. But I think understanding how that impacts your world and your employees and your customers is important. And then separately, like, really just communicating with people that are on the front lines with your customers to see where the business is going, I think is critical. I mean, one thing I know, like in 5-10 years from now, what we're doing will be different, right? I mean, in some ways, the traditional things will be the same. There will be hotel beds that we'll clean, right? And we'll make sure we have great, beautiful rooms and people are comfortable. And I can guarantee we're going to focus on human interaction and personalized service. But I think how those pieces interact with the digital world will be critically important. I don't know, increased expenses. I mean, we'll see. Like, there's a lot going on in the economy and in the world right now. So I think you just got to be prepared for anything. As I think I mentioned earlier, I think there's a big opportunity from the revenue side right now. I mean, there's a lot of there is demand coming. I mean, we have a wave we can ride here in the hospitality industry. We clearly deserve it after a really difficult year. So we got to be focused on that. But I would spend time focusing on how the customer is changing, and how our employees are changing, and how we can then take advantage of both those things to ensure our employees have the right and best experience, and then couple that with making sure our customers do the same.
Of course, of course. And then I guess this last question is for Heather. Heather, describe the importance of following progress for new programs and some tips on how to do so effectively.
Yeah, so I think this goes back to, if you look at this, the main importance of following these programs goes back to what I said about asking for money. So every year, at the beginning of our fiscal year, we come as a technology group and say, we want to do this many things this year. As I mentioned, the 23 product groups, we want to focus on all these different things. We want to build these things. We want to do digital. We want to, modernize. And so we actually asked for a considerable amount of money. I'm not going to tell you the amount, but it's in a lot of millions. And we have to ask for that money from our CEO, who then has to go to the board and ask for it. And ultimately, it's the investors that are investing in our company where that money comes from. It's a capital investment. So we have to be, financial stewards. If we are taking money from investors and saying we're going to build these things, or we're going to embark on this technology journey, we have to give you something in return. We can't just take that money and disappear with it and not show any return on our investment. So that's why program management becomes so important, because you need somebody now to take those 23 products that we're going to build with all this money to track it and make sure that we actually deliver on our word, that we will do something great with that. And so ultimately, that's what program management, I believe this is why it's so important. And then there's other things too, if our stakeholders are depending on us to deliver a certain technology to make change within the business, you need a program manager to track that to ensure that we're actually delivering on our promises. Without that, if you've ever been in a room with engineers, they're really smart people, but you do need that person to kind of guide them and say, this is what we promised, and we have to stay on track to deliver. Now, some tips and tricks. Kevin talked a little bit about agile leadership, but we actually follow within technology agile development methodology. So it's actually a, look it up. It's a really interesting way to track software development. But there's a couple of things that we do there, which I think are so important for program management. Agile methodology is all about certain consistent ceremonies is what we call them. So we do a couple things. One thing we do is we have daily stand-ups with all of the teams. So I mentioned 23 product teams. That means that there's a program manager running a 15-minute call every single day with all the people that are part of that technology product team. And what they do there is they ask, what are you working on? What is blocking you? How can I help? To keep the team on track. And I think that quick 15-minute checkpoint every single day is just so important, because you have to say, this is what I did yesterday. This is why, I'm blocked on whatever I'm doing. The other thing that we do is we actually do development in 2 weeks. So we call them 2-week sprints. But why that is so important is we plan for coding for 2 weeks. So a program manager will start the beginning of the 2 weeks and say, okay, this is the work that you're going to do within 2 weeks. And we track that. And at the end of the 2 weeks, we say, okay, what was achieved? I want to see the work. And we do a little bit of, we call it a retrospective, what went well and what didn't do well. And why the 2 weeks is so important is because you can fail fast and learn quickly. If you take a piece of coding that you do in 2 weeks and you're not successful, then you only lost 2 weeks. But if we don't have that 2-week checkpoint, what can happen is you can have someone developing code that goes through 2 weeks, no one checks in, and they're like, okay, let me try it this way. And before you know it, 3 months have gone by and you still have nothing to deliver. So it's really good to have those checkpoints. And I think really with Agile methodology, it's all about that. Let's do quick iterative development. Let's fail fast if we have to. Let's take learnings from that and let's check in daily with each other. And I think those are some of the most important things that we do within program management. And I think also another point that's very important, and some tips and tricks there, is if you do have multiple different things happening at one time, it's really good to have one oversight into all of those. So you can connect all those pieces together. A good example of that is if you are building an app and you build a new functionality within your website app, make sure that functionality is also being built on the actual website. So you always need to have that connection there. But I think for the group, it would be really interesting for you to take a little look at, Agile methodology, because I think that it's not just for tech, but I think program management in general, for any area that you're in, you can take pieces of that will really help you succeed.
Thank you, Heather. Really great tips. Now I have to take a look on Agile methodology.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we have about 13 minutes remaining for the webinar. So if anybody in our live audience does have questions for Kevin, Mark, or Heather, please type it in the Q&A feature or in the chat box, and we'll get that answered right now. Just going to ask to all of you, what do you feel is one of the most important strategies to consider for the new normal this year and the year beyond? So what are one of the most important strategies to consider? We'll start off with the VP of Hotel Strategy, Kevin.
Sure. Great question. So to that point, I think first thing is we have to try and understand what we're seeing from a trend perspective, making sure that we have visibility into booking pace, into volume, which allows us the opportunity of planning ahead as much as possible, whether it's staffing, whether it's goods and supplies, just trying to understand where our business is headed overall, as opposed to, especially late last year when we first reopened, it was a lot more reactive to the current environment. So trying to be more proactive with the approach, understanding trends, planning ahead, and then that will help us build strategy. So now I think as we get to a place of normalization and stabilization, we're starting to look even further ahead, again, based on all of these trends and being able to plan ahead. And so now we're really starting to look at what is the next, not only 12 months hold, but what is the next 3, 5, 10 years hold? And so it allows us to build that strategy. I think kind of refocusing on what I was mentioning earlier, we talk about the new normal, we talk about next year. Getting back to the basics, as I said before, is crucially important. The consumer mindset has evolved and changed, and we have got to make sure that we're providing the perception of value for money. And so that comes with experience, that comes with pricing. There is to some degree more pricing sensitivity, as long as there's perceived value for that. Not to say we can't charge the rates, because we are charging rates, we are charging good rates in a lot of cases, but it's going to be what we're doing for those rates. Customers now, because of the last year, I think have become a lot more tech savvy through whether it's apps, whether it's QR codes, and the requirement of being more tech savvy because of the nature of our business and closures that have occurred. So getting back to the basics is going to be important. And then lastly, I think is focusing on the service profit chain again, as I said earlier, making sure that we're investing in our employees, that we focus on the employee experience, because in turn that comes back to the guest experience, which then ultimately equates to profitability for the company overall.
Thank you, Kevin. And for you, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, I one, completely agree with Kevin. I mean, he has strategy in his title for a reason, obviously. But no, I'll maybe reinforce that just a little. We learned a lot, and I think all of you, I'm sure, have in your business over the last year. And when demand comes back quickly, it's easy to lose sight of some of those things you learned. So I think it's important, as Kevin mentioned, to be prepared for the future. And part of that is just being able to ensure that a lot of the learnings we've kind of gained in the last year and a half, we can continue on as demand rises and increases. I think we're all hopefully better off after everything comes back than we were before. The business has changed. How we deploy that has changed. We've implemented different technology to help us improve the customer experience. So I think being ahead of the demand curve will allow us to then spend the time to make sure all the learnings we've kind of gained in this last year continue in our operation into the future. So I'm definitely looking forward to being a part of that for the industry and coming out of this in a better place than when we entered it. I feel confident that in my past in the career, we've gone through economic downturns, which this one's obviously an interesting and different one. We've always kind of come out of it a bit better as a business than we were going into it. So I'd love to see that really continue through this for the industry.
Thank you, Mark. And for you, Heather?
Yeah, I mean, I really agree actually with Kevin and Mark said, and I think as an organization, we do have to, take those learnings and remember them. And I believe that this what we went through the last year and a half, took its toll on our teams that are working at the properties, or, people that were furloughed or laid off. And I think as an organization, we've realized that, and how hard it's been on our people. And I think it's really important for us as a leadership team to remember that and, take those learnings and ensure that, as the business changes over time, and if we encounter anything similar, or, a downturn at all, that we remember the hardships that a lot of our teams faced. It was tough. I traveled myself, and even as a customer at different properties, being told that, I can't enter the pool because it's only 50% capacity. And then you see, another patron like yelling at, these people, telling them that, I paid to enter the pool, let me enter the pool. You have to think this hardship was on so many of our people, plus staff. So hopefully as we move forward and we come out of this, we continue to focus on the people, on the front lines, dealing with everything that they're dealing with.
Absolutely. Thank you, Heather. This is a question coming from the audience, from Dawn again. We all know the resort fee is concerning for many guests, as determined by a recent survey by AHLA, because the perceived value has decreased and the fee has increased. Is MGM open to introducing a service within the resort fee that will enhance the value of the entire resort fee?
Maybe I'll jump in there first, and then Mark, Heather, feel free to add. So I think first of all, we're always looking at opportunities for how we continue to enhance our product and service offerings. So the short answer there is absolutely. I think the question then is, what can we do? That's where I do think we have to figure out what is that perceived level of value to make sure that resort fee just isn't another fee, that it's something that there is a perceived value for that. There's, of course, as the industry has evolved and changed, there's the inclusion of Wi-Fi, which used to be something that was chargeable on its own. The industry, again, has evolved and changed. And so that's where, Dawn, it comes into my responsibility, my team's responsibility, looking at those trends, looking at what we need to do, what we can do, what we should do to ensure that there is that value of in perception of value for money. So absolutely, I would actually be interested in Anthony, Andy, maybe you can help with that. I'd be interested in seeing more details around that survey from the consumer standpoint, to see what we can do, what are people saying. We have insight from our perspective and our guests, but would love more sources of information. So I'm absolutely, definitely looking forward to any opportunity to add value.
Thank you, Kevin. And then we'll take the last question from the audience. This is coming from Anonymous. Anonymous asks, as the pandemic continues moving behind us, does the panel envision hotels' future budgets for cleanliness, health, and safety remain higher compared to before the pandemic?
Maybe I'll take the first shot here, and Kevin can maybe clean up what I say. Nice to meet you, Anonymous. Thank you for the question. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I think in the end, as I've kind of spoken, I think the customer and the consumer is going to kind of decide that, right? In the end, we're in the business taking care of people. And so, if I were to guess on what the consumer is going to ask for, is there's going to be a higher level of cleanliness expected. I know, me as a consumer, my habits have certainly changed, and I have that expectation. So, as a hospitality company in the hotel industry, like we're gonna take care of our customers, and they're going to be the ones that decide the services we provide in the end. So my crystal ball would suggest that obviously in the near term, for sure. And I think a lot of these habits we've learned in the last year will continue. So I would expect yes.
Yeah, I'll add, 100% agree. And we're already seeing that as an industry. Case in point, we obviously partner with AAA, and AAA comes in and does inspections of our properties on a regular basis. And one component of the new AAA testing, of the new AAA experience test, is actually a cleanliness test around surface tests. So they take and they swab surfaces to understand bacteria that might exist on those surfaces. And there's a pass or fail score associated with that. So not only are we seeing it from what our guests are saying, but other companies such as AAA, Forbes, et cetera, are also seeing that request. So the short answer is yes. Again, it goes back to what really is important. I think cleanliness overall is certainly more forefront of mind than it ever has been before. But cleanliness involves a lot of different things. There's chemicals. I can be sure that we are looking at things from a different perspective through a different lens in today's environment, as well as the future of cleanliness. How do we make sure that not only are we cleaning surfaces, but that they're also free of bacteria and residue, that and how we're inspecting that from our own lens as well. But then there's also air quality within our properties, the filtration systems that we use, the HVAC systems, and a lot of other components as it relates to cleanliness overall. So yes, I do think that there's a lot that will definitely stay around, not only for the near term, but for the long term as well.
Of course, thank you for that. I think we have just 1 minute left, so we're going to go ahead and close off this webinar. Once again, we want to thank our guest panelists, Mark Zerzyniak, Kevin Holyfield, and Heather Buttery for participating in this discussion on leading the industry in today's environment. I'm sure all of us in the audience has gotten some great takeaways on how we can be stronger leaders during this time. If any of our audience members have missed a portion of this webinar, you're able to watch the full recording. We'll upload it on our NHLA YouTube channel, as well as on our ndhotels.com website within the next few days. Please make sure to follow us on LinkedIn or Facebook. We want you to keep updated with our virtual events. All the virtual events are available on the NHLA calendar. Just type in ndhotels.com, click on the event tab, and you'll see a listing of the upcoming events that we have planned for this season. Special thanks again to Andy Meese for the creation of the MGM webinar series. Once again, my name is Anthony Lai. Thank you for joining us today. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you all.